I got myself all excited to go to the movies, put my hood on, put my mask on, and cinemas are still closed here. I really wanted to go see Mortal Kombat. Wait a minute. It's on demand. Now I just need to find the remote. Get over here! Oh, you can give me Wonder Woman powers or atomic breath, but a hook in the hand, that's too much. We can't do that. Something that might actually benefit your life. Damn. Ugh. I have to lean slightly. This movie better be worth the goddamn effort. Mortal Kombat was a game that they turned into a film. Then there was more games, and now there's more films. Ugh, we're gonna have to do this over. It's like combat with a C instead of a K. God damn it. You probably don't even need all the digits on one hand to count the video game movies that are actually any good. And few have had as many bites at the cinematic apple as Mortal Kombat. And on paper, it seems like it should not be that hard. I mean, it's a fighting game, and sure, the stories have gotten more complex as the series has progressed, but at its heart, it's a relatively simple idea that should be pretty easy to execute. Now, if you ask fans of a certain generation, they already nailed it in one. I mean, people hold up the 95 Mortal Kombat film as the greatest video game movie of all time. It's not. It's fine. And if nothing else, it felt like this film was a chance to right the wrongs that film made and give us the definitive and at least better Mortal Kombat film. Now, I'm a fan of the Mortal Kombat series, particularly the more recent entries, and while I'm not going to claim to know every bit of backstory or lore, I certainly enjoy the series, and as a fan of the series, like many, I was pretty excited and hyped for this film. And watching the film as a fan is a little bit of a mixed bag, whereas if you're watching this as a non-fan, I don't know if you'd understand it, but certainly I don't think you could get much out of this film at all. So from a fan standpoint, there's a lot to enjoy here. Visually, this is probably the best adaptation of these characters you could ask for. I mean, they look phenomenal, and they look the part, from costumes to effects. It's really hard not to nerd out as well, seeing some iconic moves and fatalities brought to life so faithfully. And they also just managed to get a lot of characters in here, and overall, the characterization is pretty on point, give or take a few missteps. There is drawbacks to knowing this series though. While there is a lot of characters, you might be annoyed at some of the characters that didn't make the cut. Cough, Johnny Cage, cough. There are some changes and shortcuts made as well for the sake of the film that felt pretty lazy and just weren't entirely satisfying. But if there's one thing that's definitely going to draw the ire of fans, and in my opinion rightfully so, it's the inclusion of a new character made entirely for the film, our lead played by Lewis Tan, Cole Young. Now, when this was announced, people were pretty annoyed, but at least personally, I saw the logic behind it, giving us this character that's sort of an audience surrogate. And sure, making him the lead was a bit of a strange choice, but I figured, hey, at least if they balance things right, they can make this work. But they didn't, and it doesn't. Cole is an incredibly dull character. His defining characteristic seems to be that he has a family, which is both uninteresting and also not given that much screen time, which makes it all the more pointless. Now, they do give him a mysterious connection to another character, but honestly, by the time it was revealed, it was so minor to me that it barely registered at all. And I also want to talk about his fighting style, because of course all these other characters have had sort of a chance to develop their moveset over the course of several games. But he's kind of just thrown in here. He's a former MMA fighter. And because of that, his fight style just doesn't feel very unique or interesting at all. And because of that, sometimes his fight scenes can feel a bit lackluster as well. He just gets way too much focus and never really feels the better for it. But they also made him incredibly overpowered. I mean, honestly, there's several encounters in the film where he comes out on top in a way that's bound to leave fans annoyed. There's one in particular that feels like a real slap in the face, and that's to say nothing about the fact that they literally gave him plot armor. They just make this character too central to the film, and if nothing else, the performance isn't good enough to justify that. And while some of the established characters help lessen that blow, they're not all winners either. Sonya Blade, Jax, Kung Lao, and even Scorpion feel like they get the short end of the stick at times. Similarly, Melina and Raiden mostly feel underutilized. The film feels like it's trying to get a lot of origins out of the way, and while some of these characters do have their moments, don't be surprised if you go see the film and some of your favourite characters don't get the focus you're hoping for. Well, at least we found out how Scorpion got his kunai, right? Isn't that what we've all been waiting for? The characters that do get a chance to excel, though, are surprisingly few. Sub-Zero does well in a more antagonistic role than usual, which might not be to everyone's sensibilities, but at least in my opinion, I thought it was pretty good. I liked the character in this film and I liked the performance. A surprising slam dunk is Cabal, who came out looking pretty cool for some reason. Liu Kang does take a bit of a backseat to his usual sort of top billing in the story, but he had enough moments where I felt like they at least did the character some degree of justice. But most surprising is the character that steals the show, and that's Kano. I mean, Kano's a mainstay in the series, but I've always looked at him with a degree of familiarity as opposed to admiration. Like, I wasn't like, yes, Kano. I was always just like, oh, yeah, Kano. Josh Lawson as Kano is fantastic. He works as a comedic relief and has some fantastic action and fight scenes. I couldn't get enough of the Kano character.
Kano wins. You fucking beauty.
The wide roster of fighters is of course in keeping with the games, but for a film you're going to need a strong story as well. And unfortunately that's an area where Mortal Kombat also falls short. For one, there's no actual Mortal Kombat in this. There's no tournament. This film is all recruiting champions for the tournament, which I guess will take place in a sequel. To make things less interesting and more lazy, all the champions are born with a birthmark of the Mortal Kombat logo. How very convenient for all involved. That is some effective branding. At times it feels like the film is more obsessed with potential sequels than just getting the first film right. Characters don't always get a satisfying resolution, and it feels like we're being teased that we'll see them in their final form somewhere down the road. The story threads don't all feel fully tied up either, and the sequel bait thrown at you at the last act is the most brutal thing in the whole film. As you can imagine though, the fact that there's no tournament in the film, and this is mainly about introducing characters, means there's not much in the way of story here. They're investigating the Mortal Kombat tournament, which isn't in the film. They're training for the Mortal Kombat tournament, which isn't in the film. They're fighting to save the Mortal Kombat tournament, which isn't in the film. Are you starting to see a problem here? And I'm not saying they need to rush and get to the tournament already. Plenty of the games don't revolve fully around the tournament. It's just that making it so central to the plot just sells your story short. And I'm all for spending the time to develop these characters, but the problem is they spend a lot of their time with this uninteresting character with an unsatisfying backstory, and I don't want to keep coming back to that. But it's a major problem. They could have spent that time improving the story and developing characters that could have gotten a bit more development, and it would have led to a better movie. But of course, we come to Mortal Kombat for the fights and those bloody fatalities. So what about those? The fight scenes in the film though are the obvious highlight, and this is where they show real loyalty to the source material, with the choreography lifting moves directly from the game and putting them up on the big screen, and it's incredibly satisfying to watch. I did think the film would be a little bit gorier. We didn't get too many of the ultra-violent fatalities, but the ones we did get were a lot of fun and worth the price of admission alone. Now, if I did have one nitpick with the fight scenes, it's that there was a little bit too much cutting. I mean, when you're playing the Mortal Kombat game, of course, it's very smooth, and I kind of feel like it would have benefited the fight scenes here to have something a bit more natural and a bit less cutty. But that being said, that's only a minor quibble. Rather interesting to me is that if you mix the 95 film and this film, you'd have a pretty good combination, as both nailed certain aspects and fumbled others. And it really does feel like this film sort of possibly learned a few lessons about what worked from the 95 film and applied them here. So while the film isn't a flawless victory, oh come on, everyone's making that joke. The film has its issues, but I had an undeniably fun time watching it. The film never really dragged for me, and honestly, the ending of the film snuck up on me altogether. And while there were certainly places where I left wanting a bit more, the moments where it did work led to an incredibly entertaining and enjoyable experience that left me excited for round 2.